Hey, Honey Wash Day. This is Toksa Hour. I am Maggie Ross, and I'm live from Porcupine, South Dakota, along the Porcupine Creek where the porcupines roam. This morning, well, we're recovering a little bit, I guess, from a snowstorm that came through and dropped, not foots though. There was no feet of snow, but it's already melting, so you can already see the ground, So that was a little. Yesterday was some snow and Friday, I think was yesterday Friday? No, yesterday was Saturday. Anyways, this is the Sunday morning live, and I have a special guest, and he'll join us as soon as he's ready. Carl Petersen. Carl Petersen is from Cheyenne River Sioux tribe. He, I'm very fortunate. I was not his teacher, but I was his son or his brother's teacher and his father's colleague. So I'm really glad to have Carl along for this morning's Toksa Hour. I I'm sitting here trying to get these things. Oh, here he is.
Yeah. How
So
Doc Jaffe?
Carl
Yeah.
is he's like a techie guy. I think, didn't you get your degree in gaming or something like that, or am I wrong?
Yeah. I can just go ahead and introduce myself. So, how Doc
Okay.
Jaffe? We talk piluta emia wa wasi chunchaze Carl Peterson. Wambli paha owati wa o henupa hemataha. Wakpawashte hemataha. So, ina wayaki Cora Peterson wa ate wayaki Douglas Peterson. My name's Carl Peterson. From Eagle Butte, like Maggie said. O henupa Lakota. And my parents are Cora and Douglas Peterson. They're teachers here. Like Maggie said, my father was the tribal government teacher at Eagle Butte for 30 years, our longest serving BIE government teacher. Um, and my mom's the principal. I went to school at Dakota State University after my 13 years as a Brave here in Eagle Butte, and I got a degree in computer game design. Um, so that's the development, coding, art, music, and design of games. It's kind of a very wide field of how do you tell stories and then make them into computer games. That's the coding part of it. Um, I've worked as a technology um, person for the tribe during COVID, helping to design our tribe's checkpoint and contact tracing databases. And then I moved on to the radio station where I work in grants and the technology of keeping the radio station online. And I also teach at the Eagle Butte School as the agriculture teacher for plants, metals, and animals, and the sciences and techniques needed to manage those different fields as an agriculturalist. So that's me.
Be impressed with Carl. He was an agricultural guy. So when I was there, he was in what was the program called?
FFA, yeah. So that was why they asked me to come back and teach despite having a computer game design degree was I had taken all 10 of our FFA agriculture classes when I was in school at Eagle Butte. So I at least knew where everything was. And the old ag teacher quit the day before school. She went to be the principal at Takini and so didn't quit, just moved on to something else. And I just happened to be in town and they said, "Hey, you know what this is? Can you teach it?" That's South Dakota. You have to have a bachelor's degree to be a teacher, and then you get 3 years to get the content. And so I'm working on that right now, my certification.
Your journey as a gamer.
Yeah.
You were working on a design, right? You were working on a language, um, or what was it, a language app or something like that? I remember back when I think you were a junior or senior in college.
Yeah. So my journey as a gamer starts when my dad brought home a disc. We love the Spirit Stallion of the Cimarron movie, another one of those appropriation movies. But hey, as a native kid, it was cool to see horses running around and the Indians winning. That was one of my favorite movies. And here there was a video game that went with it where you went around as the horse and collected arrowheads to help the other horses out. And it was for my dad had a 1998 Compaqua computer, had 40 gigabytes of total storage. Um, by today's standards, probably slower than molasses. And in 2005, he got a new computer. And so my brother and I got to share the old one. And so we'd play games on that. Um, when I was about 12 or 13, I was visiting my cousin in the Black Hills, and he had this game called World of Warcraft, which was an online game. And I'm like, oh, I could play with you all the way from Eagle Butte. And he's like, yeah, but if you do this, you're gonna get addicted. Like even then, he knew he was probably in college then. He knew that some of these online games can take up a lot of time. And that was me all through junior high and high school. I put about 6,600 hours into a video game. And on the res, I kind of say, well, I guess it's better than drugs, sex, or meth, right? Or alcohol. That's a lot of my peers, getting pregnant while I was in high school or on drugs. And um, so here I was 10 miles away in Parade on a computer, hanging out with people from all over the country. And I definitely think that had quite a bit of impact on me. It meant I didn't have quite as many friends here, but I'm not sure I would have anyway. Um, and my only real interaction locally, like within the school, was, through sports and FFA, different activities. I'm kind of one of those people who just like loves organized activities and loves like spaces where they're using Robert's Rules of Order because then I get to talk what I want to talk. Like, I have a hard time talking in a group when there's not a system for when you're allowed to talk. So I'll either take up all the time or none of it. I don't know. But so video games gave me that ability to have a space where I was more comfortable talking with people and there were people that were interested in the same things I was. So I went to school and I ended up making a couple of video games. The first one was TP Kaga, which is TP Builder. Um, and I had the idea. I was at Crazy Horse and was working there. One of the elders, Lula Red Cloud, and her brother, we were talking about that, a lot of kids had never had that opportunity to put a teepee together. And that was kind of weird to me because, like my whole life I'd been around teepee putting up contests at the powwow, and my parents got one to go camping in because they won the teepee putting up contest or something like that. Um, and there were kids at this summer thing that I went to. It was the Crazy Horse, summer program right before college, and kids from all over the country, but even Lakotas from our reservations here that had never put up a teepee. And so I was talking to my colleague or my the other students, um, classmates, I guess you could say, and some of them were like, I was like, how that's an open world game. You can run around and do all these different things. I want one of those games where you play as Lakota people back when, before colonization. So Ihani, I wanted to play that, you know, as a fantasy basically. And I'm kind of stepped away from this now is but back then, that was what me and a lot of my friends are like, what would it be like to live a day of our ancestors' lives? Like, I'd seen there was a Polish company that had made a simulation basically of 10 square miles, one of their villages, and a day in a life of one of their villages, which was like really realistic. And at that time, that's what I thought I wanted to make was something that showed a realistic portrayal of what our lives were like back then. Um, as far as I got was making the teepee. And that game got some support from Billy Mills and the Running Strong Foundation. And we were able to, get some custom art, some recorded language from one of our elders here. And it's available now at northernplainsgames.com. The other game I worked on was When Rivers Were Trails, which was developed by Beth LaPense out of Michigan State University with the Indian Land Tenure Foundation, and it follows the trail of an Anishinaabe woman in 1890 being kicked off her land during the Dawes Act. So where they were camping ends up getting sold to a white person and they evict her. And she ends up walking all the way to California across the reservations during that time period of about April 1890. So like one of the characters that I wrote for the game was Sitting Bull. You run into Sitting Bull as you're walking along the Grand River. And you run into Spotted Tail and all of our people, living along the Cheyenne and Cherry Creek that would end up at Wounded Knee later that year. And so that was the idea of the game, was to show um, the the harm that the Allotment Act did, opening the reservations. Like here, it was weird because for the Anishinaabe, it started right away. They opened in 1890 and they were already being moved off their land. But for us, you know, of course, 1890 was Wounded Knee. Um, but up on Cheyenne River, we didn't have our land sold until 1910. And so even though, we were definitely aware of the issues and certain people here signed the 1889 Act and certain people didn't, um, allotment started, but the most adverse effect, the wholesale seizure of our land by the government and distribution to non-Indians, that didn't happen here until 1910. Now I know it's happened on Rosebud a lot earlier, and so there were some other writers for that game that wrote like the Rosebud and the Pine Ridge perspective, and it was a little bit different down there. So it was really interesting to see that the differences on how these different government acts affected different reservations. And it's the stories of these families that the writers were from, that were all working on this video game. There were over 20 of us that wrote for the game. And I thought that was a really cool experience. You have any questions?
One of the things that I find very interesting is just like the generational movement into technology.
Hmm.
And so like my generation, when I was in high school, my computer class was learning how to put a dot on the screen and how to make using DOS or whatever and putting dots on the screen to make a design. And so that was my computer class. And then I think back about like how computers have evolved and in education, to even when I was in college, I think we were still doing typewriters. And so if you went to the library, you can reserve a typewriter and type your paper. And then eventually, I think I maybe my senior year or junior year, um, uh, one of those years, anyways, the computer actually, like you can, and you had the floppy disk. So,
Yeah,
so
I
I,
finally got the computer. But yeah, that's my mom coded in like punch cards when she went to school at SDSU in the late 70s. And so she says she remembers when BASIC first came out, the first computer at SDSU that wasn't a punch card machine. Um, and she's like, I'll tell her like one of my professors at DSU was on the original, like one of the people working on the original internet at college, and she's like, and I'm like, yeah, he said that they turned it online in like 1972, and she's like, well, it wasn't in South Dakota. And so when you said, Gen Z on the poster, I was thinking about that too. Is like, um, I fit the age range for Gen Z just barely. I was born in '98, so some people would say I'm on the edge um between Gen Z and Gen X by age. Uh, but I have a grandfather that was born in 1913, and like both my grandfathers fought in World War II. So I'm probably closer in experience and like the people I was around growing up to like a Gen X person. Like my first TV was black and white, but that was when I was really little, black and white. But then we had a computer and we had dial-up. That was one of the stories I always told, was when dial-up first came to Cheyenne River. Dad had a internet modem in Rapid that he was bouncing off of, And mom always joked that it was a very expensive telephone bill. And dad always says it wasn't that bad, but mom was pretty sure it was that bad. To check your email cost, a couple $100 in 1990s money, and on a teacher's salary that probably wasn't. She's like, I don't know. I think we should buy groceries, maybe. That's the always the joke we get on the internet. We didn't have fiber internet here until I graduated high school. So it's literally the year I went to college that the telephone authority finally put internet into our house. We were on satellite before that because the dial-up just didn't make any sense. The satellite was cheaper, but it was pretty slow. Whereas today kids have, 100 up, 100 down. They're on TikTok 24/7. We couldn't watch YouTube. Like even the generational gap between me and the kids I'm teaching today, like when I was in high school, we couldn't watch YouTube at home. We didn't have fast enough internet on the res. And that always is weird to me. Like they say that millennials are kind of the transition and that Gen Z, they're the first ones to grow up with it like natively. And like the iPhone has been out their entire life. Like I remember the
Yes.
iPhone thing. I'm old enough to remember when they announced the iPhone, but not quite old enough to remember when they announced the PC, right? The first laptop computers were already a thing. Are you there?
I think that is like so like just the describing of how technology influences people. And
Hmm.
so as a teacher, I had the tech guy. He would go off to training, then he'd come back and he'd say, "Maggie, I got some new training on technology or on this app or doing this or doing that." And nobody was, no other teachers were really interested in it.
Yeah. But you were always trying to implement it in your classes, like as soon as it was coming out.
Excuse me, my throat. So yeah, I was always the guinea pig, I guess. I would try it out and like, yeah, this works, or it's good, or it'd be exciting, and the students would think it was exciting and stuff. Um and then it was so funny when I went to Eagle Butte, because you guys didn't have that much technology in your school. I mean, you had technology, but you didn't have as much. And I was like, wow, this is okay, we got a smart board. It was real like limited in what I could do because you guys all didn't have um
Like touchscreens.
laptops
So at
or
that point, you already had touchscreens and stuff
mhm.
and laptops. See, in 2016, the idea that every student would have a laptop at a school that size, like across South Dakota, that wasn't something that anybody was really able to finance it. Some of the smaller tribal schools, like, were able to do it. Maybe some of the Catholic schools or the private schools had them. Um, Eagle Butte didn't get every student a computer until about 3 weeks after COVID started. So 3 weeks after we sent kids home, we sent computers home. And the tribe put up little hotspots, but it never worked too well. But now
And
they
because
still have those same computers from COVID in
there's no
2025. Yeah.
there was no training.
Uh-huh.
So when you don't have technology or have limited technology, and then you just
Hmm.
throw all this technology at people, they're just not able to do it.
Yeah. And that's especially when people were at home. Zoom, I think most of our teachers and students got it pretty quickly. But of course, the kids learned out how to turn off their mics and turn off their cameras. Um, and it was a lot for parents too. So, but even now in the classroom again, um, like managing phones in class has been one of the big issues that people have been pushing for a long time, and just like attention spans and stuff. So it's been really interesting to see how like different teachers react to it. I think definitely depending on their age. Like,
And then it just
there's
goes back
yeah.
to the whole thing of training and purpose, right?
Hmm.
Like, I taught at OLC through COVID, and
Hmm.
everybody had, what you just described. That's what happened.
Hmm.
And
So
not every
not every student had a computer going in. It's not
Oh,
like
well,
OLC
when
issued one,
OLC
right?
first went into COVID, they
Hmm.
just got everybody a smartphone and just expected them to do so. You'd have like people, here's your smartphone,
Yeah.
and they're typing papers.
Yeah.
on their smartphone.
Yeah.
And so everybody was looking like for the most convenient way, easiest way, and cheapest way to get through this process.
But not the way that best supported people's educations, right? That's the
Right.
it's interesting. I definitely think that's one thing that I think about a lot is the differences on how people think about technology and where they're coming from on it. Um, so I don't know, what else are you thinking, like big picture ideas for today? Or
So,
almost that, or
well,
is this halfway through 9:30?
no, we're at
No.
9:25.
Yeah.
Oh, almost. Your dad's in the waiting room. Should I let
Yeah,
him
it's my
in?
computer.
Oh,
I
okay. It's your
just have his
computer.
Zoom account on there. Yeah, I have his Zoom account. I'll change the name.
Okay, I'm like,
But
should I
I
let
have
your
a real
dad in?
camera on there. I'm like OLC. I'm like when the computer don't work, break out the smartphone. So that's how I've been on here all
Yeah.
day today. We'll see if
So,
this works.
so some of the things that like I think about in generational gaps, so we have a technology generational gap. So
Hmm.
like a Gen Xer may not really know how best to use um technology to socially organize versus a Gen Zer. Like I've watched some Gen Zers organize using technology, using social media, and then they take this process and they start to organize and create movements. And
Hmm.
so on TikTok, I'm an avid user of TikTok. um, I'm watching Generation Z people like create such a big movement, and they're like pro Pally. Most of, majority of Gen Z people that I see on TikTok are pro Pally and are pro Palestine.
Hmm.
And one of the things that came out for that was one that Gen Z became a threat. So you
Hmm.
had the what is it called? The ADL. What does that stand for? Something Defamation League.
Uh-huh. American
Anyways,
Definition.
so they're associated with anti-Semitism and um, support for Israel and APAC and all of that. And so I've watched them organize in such a way that they get targeted and identified through this ADL organization saying, we one have a Gen Z problem, and we have a TikTok problem.
Hmm.
And so just from that, then came this whole movement to slow down or shut down TikTok in the movement. And so people, Generation Z people, they just like, okay, we'll pivot. So they they speak in code. That's another thing that I'd be like, what? Wait, now what does that mean? And then I'll have to go and do a Google search of, okay, say so they said this, so what does that mean? So
Hmm.
okay, they're gonna go organize over here. So I've watched them organize shutdowns for different corporations. So I'm on this whole ban thing, right? I use the No Thanks app, and I buy whatever it says I can buy. So if
Stuff that is
Kellogg's,
not
which
as
is
connected to all of that.
it, it just seems like everything to them, they found
Yeah.
ways around all this process of saying, okay, well, we have TikTok, and then they're the ones that got us all to move over to do you want me to accept that one?
Yeah. But
Um
finally have a
they
real camera.
so anyways, they do this whole, like they make the connection between um whatever needs to be brought forward. And I don't know why my thing went off. Um so they they organize, they're basically they use technology to organize. They also are one of Generation Z is one of the largest, or is right now currently the largest generation in existing. So you guys beat out the boomers. The millennials beat out the boomers, and then you guys beat out the millennials too. So it's really interesting. Like how do you do that? Like you ran for office
Mhm.
up there. Did you use any of these tools to organize, or how did
A
you?
little. When I was running for tribal council, I had a TikTok, and it was really popular. And it turns out it was really popular with people who couldn't vote. And so a lot of the people that were watching my TikToks were 18 and younger. Um, and maybe there were some 18 and over ones that were watching, but they weren't as enthusiastic about it. Like that was always the younger kids were the ones that were super excited to see somebody running for tribal council on TikTok. Um, I used Facebook quite a bit, and it's beginning to only reach a certain group, and that's kind of what each one of these social medias, they only reach the people who are on them, and certain crowds gather on different platforms. That's been something for a long time where Facebook has kind of been like the native social media, even after it went out of fashion. With other groups, there's a lot of natives that are on Facebook, like a bigger percent, I think, than the average population. And there's a lot of native communities on Facebook and groups and all that. There's also a lot of pretendians on Facebook, but um, Twitter never seemed to have taken, was not an app that anybody was interested in up here. Um, Instagram, another Facebook project. How am I sounding? Is it working?
You come in and out,
Yeah.
and then your room got really dark.
Yeah. The phone has a better camera, huh? But yeah.
In
That's what I've seen. You've ran down there. Have you used like what tools have you used when you're running for office, or do you
did a
believe
mix. I
in
did,
that?
when I first ran, I created a Facebook page. That's when I was running for District 27. So I created a Facebook page and a website and did all of that. And um, I mean it did okay, but I find like around here that a lot of that the thing that you're saying, like people that are gonna vote, I found that they're face to face. So I
Mhm.
tried to go door to door the best I could, because on the reservation we have reservation dogs, so it
Mhm.
kind of makes that a little bit difficult at times.
Yeah.
I remember when I was running for District 27, like it I went canvassing, me and my granddaughter, and some of it kind of got scary for us, so I thought, well, I can't do that anymore. So I try to just kind of stick to the sidewalk, or kind of walking around in parking lots or whatever, maybe putting flyers on windshields and things like that. But it was really it's different, I think. And it's I go along this philosophy, and I think you may have heard me talk about it before, where traditionally when we don't support somebody, or we don't support an organization, we don't show up. So I just don't go vote for it. And so we have that is like um a historical problem, that trying to get people to the polls, and why should they vote? And then
And
the
that's the
other
question,
thing.
is it a problem, right? I think that really comes to
Mhm.
it. A lot of people are disenfranchised, and I think technology and media is one of the reasons that it's hit in the way it has. But it's almost like tradition here, that's like you were saying, a way to protest the system, um, is to not vote. And, you know, there's for and against on that, right? Reasons you might want to do it and reasons you might not want to. Um,
Yes.
but it's really hard to reach people when they're already set in their ways. And that's the same thing we end up with technology is if someone is not interested, then there's not really a lot you can do about it.
Right. I think like when I ran for tribal council, I ran last administration and then this administration I ran for tribal council, and mostly just because I think people deserve a choice, because a lot of times it's the same people that run over and over and over and over again, and then they say, "Well, I didn't have a choice" or whatever. So I ran to give people a choice. I think the first time I lost by, I came in third by, and I lost the second seat by like, I think it was 20 votes or 40 votes or something like that. And then the second time it was like 7 votes. So, but it's tough because you have to go try to meet with people, talk to people. Tribal politics can be much more difficult than that I found running for a state office. So,
It's interesting,
and
right? Like you'd think it's a lot of the same people, but it's the same thing with social media. The elections that people choose to participate in, even if they're native, right? There's a lot of people here that participate in state politics who just don't even bother to go vote in tribal elections, and vice versa. Um, one thing
it's a
I found
bigger
is, yeah,
it's a bigger audience too, right? Like in Porcupine District, I'm just one district.
uh-huh.
But running for state office, District 27, it encompasses more people. So maybe
Almost like is
somebody,
Hermosa in 27? They said a lot of a decent count amount of Pennington County is, but like the area
no,
over by
we
Redford.
we like scenic
Yeah.
population 10,
Uh-huh.
Wasta population 100, they're not very the what of Pennington County. So Pennington County that gets included now is like Box Elder. I think there's a part of Box Elder that gets pushed into Pennington County, but they're
That's
doing
pretty far
everything they
north,
can
isn't it?
to, huh?
It's pretty far north for you
Hmm.
guys to have a
Yep.
district that goes from the Nebraska line all the way to Box Elder. That's how it is here too. It's they added Perkins County into District 28A. And so, you know, having one person represent everybody from basically what is Selfridge is on the North Dakota side, but the South Dakota North Dakota border up there on Standing Rock, all the way down to the Cheyenne River and from the Missouri all the way to Bison. And the people in Bison and the people in Swiftburg have wholly different worlds. Like their worlds are different, not just that they have different politics, but that the way they've experienced the world is quite a bit different. Is Interior in the Pennington County part, or is it in a different county?
With in District 27.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's all mostly like we get parts of Phillip.
Yeah.
When we go up into Hawken County,
Yeah.
Bennett County, Jackson County, Oglala, Lakota County, and then parts of Pennington County.
Yeah,
And
that's
that
really interesting.
the more the more they try there, is to water down the native vote.
Yeah.
And they added a whole bunch of people, but they still still didn't take out the Lakota women that ran for office.
Well, that was here. I think I was the first Democrat to lose in District 28A. So since it was created with the minority majority, because that would you guys got to keep a single district, so you get a senator basically, right? Here and on Rosebud, they split it into A and B. So it was like, oh well, you can have one House member for the res, but you don't have enough people to have a senator, and so you have to compete. Like with us, it's Belle Fourche. Um, Belle Fourche basically elects our senator. And for Rosebud, they had one for a while, and then um, because I think Chamberlain is in there, and it was weird. They had a native that was in there for a long time, and then he termed out. That was Troy. Can't remember his last name. And then they had that Sean Bordeaux in there for 2 years, and now he was beat out. So that's one less Democratic senator. And I was beat up here. The guy before me, Orrin Lesmeister, a non-Indian, had run in our district, and he was in his sixth year when they redistricted, and he won last time the House seat once they added 600 people. Perkins County's pretty red. Um, he won by about 20 votes. Then the next election I ran and I lost by about 600. And so I know, I lost. I actually had more votes than him in Perkins County because there were more people voting, but there were a lot of people that came out for this election, the presidential election, who didn't come out 2 years ago. And that's what we see up here is that there are quite a few Republicans, and usually they say it's the Democrats that don't vote in the midterms, but up here it's the Democratic vote stays about the same. Like the people that vote vote, and the Republican vote that surges in Trump years. I don't know. I haven't gone back far enough to see if they did that before, he was running for president. But every time he's on the ballot, um, there's some natives that support him, but there's also quite a few non-Indians that just aren't too interested in politics, but they're interested in him. And so that was really interesting for me to see. I thought it was possible to lose, but I was not expecting to lose by 600 votes. And that was pretty crazy. I won
Things
Dewey
that
County though. I won Eagle Butte, but it gets a little bit harder when you get up Timberlake and Corson County, McLaughlin. A lot of people, if you're watching, McLaughlin that showed up, Little Eagle, Bullhead. Um, I always have to shout out Bullhead. Of the 56 people that voted in Bullhead, 53 of them voted for me. Only three voted Republican. And I'm like, geez, Bullhead knows where their priorities are at. But it seems like a lot of our communities are pretty fractured. Like these families don't talk to these families and that kind of stuff.
it's kind of thinking about this, like how we aren't really I mean, we look at things as red and blue,
Hmm.
Democrat or Republican, because that's kind of what the
It's
landscape
what we're
says.
forced into, right?
Yeah. But like what I'm finding is that we're forced into institutions or being a part of organizations that don't really care. I
Yeah.
mean, they need your vote.
But they don't represent you. They're
They
not
don't
interested in
represent
what's
you.
best for Native people. I understand that. Um, I do think there are some Native people that have ran as Republicans in South Dakota that have done some decent things. But at the same time, just like Democrats, they're supporting these systems that do not care about us. They're propping people up who are there to hurt us. And so it's always interesting, um, you know, choosing the lesser of two evils and where you draw the line on, like you said, some people draw the line at not voting. If there's no good answer, then why even go? But I do think it's still worth voting.
People,
Oh,
I vote.
yeah, I vote.
But I'm not a one team player.
Yeah.
Like um I will do research with people. I can tell you, like I personally, like I have some conservatism in me. I'm more progressive, maybe a progressive conservative. I don't know, but like I'm like there's some things like I've always liked Mike Grounds. Mike Grounds probably did some real crappy stuff, but I liked him as governor because like I thought that he did do some things for Native people in education. Like he did things. Um,
I'm just waiting for Larry Roden to build a road between Union Center and New Underwood. They said they're going to make it a real state highway. I'm like, we finally have a governor from out here in the middle of nowhere. And if he does one good thing, he might as well build a road.
yeah, interested in that guy too. Like, what is he? Who is he? Like, how is he going to be different than Christy Nome? Did you see the stuff where um they came out with her travel, her over
Yeah.
expenditure of travel, and then
She sued the Dakota
Jack Lee,
Scout that
attorney.
published it. She sued them for defamation for publishing her travel logs.
Who did
It's
she
like, what
sue?
is your defense? Well, they should have never released it. It's like, oh, well, that's not that doesn't meet the standard of,
I know,
defamation has to be when it's a public figure. They have to have,
in public
these people
money.
believe, right, actual malice that they knew that this was false and it was going to hurt you. But it isn't false. It's state records. It was, released by the state.
And then
Five,
you
what
have
did it say?
Marty.
$500,000 just for 2024 in credit card expenses
Yeah,
on credit
yeah.
card.
There's a lot with her, like her travel, her expenditures, wherever she was staying, and then Marty Jackley, what did he do? He posted his or released his travel, and then is like pursuing something, an investigation, or I'm not really sure. I'm like, is Marty Jack? See, this is my thinking all the time. Oh, is Marty Jackley gonna run for governor again?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure he
That
is.
is that what's going on? And
Yeah.
then, like I've been keeping an eye on Dusty Johnson
Mm-hmm.
because Dusty Johnson's been doing things like he's gonna run for
Gonna
governor.
run for governor, yeah.
And
Um,
so
and now Roden has created a committee for himself too, so it's gonna be a pretty interesting Republican primary for governor in South Dakota. And then you look at the other side with the Democrats, and it's usually crickets until the last minute, and somebody bites the bullet and does it. So we'll see.
party I became independent because I just like mm,
Yeah,
this
it's
is
it's
just
all
when whenever they got on the APAC machine and went to like I watched the genocide in Gaza every day. Every day I watched it. And I called people, I even called Democrats, and they're all supporting. And I'm just like, why don't I can't support you, and I can't support this organization, and I can't support any of it. I can't support you Republicans. I mean, I've talked to Dusty Johnson about, we're in South Dakota, here you are on the House floor fighting about the those medals that happened at that was given to the Seventh Cavalry at Wounded Knee, and then you're over here voting to genocide another people, give them more money. Oh man, I've been brutal. So I'm surprised that they have not blocked my calls, my number. Don't take calls from her. She's too irate.
Yeah, well then you could sue them. You have a right to be heard, right? And that's the thing is when they start violating our rights, they actually give us more leverage right now. But then that's one day they're gonna stop hearing those court cases is what I'm afraid of. They stop having the rule of law when it comes to the rights for people. That's what could be really scary. And it's all really scary. I think for our average person, it's a lot. It's just so much to even understand what's going on, you know, that our government is supporting genocide on the other side of the world, and we're paying for it, you know. Um,
You
what do we do to stop it? We get one vote every 2 years, and in South Dakota, it feels like, you could vote either way and it still wouldn't make much of a difference.
like as a millennial, like you were talking about, like in TikTok, like you had a lot of influence with people that were typically voters in your community or in your district.
Well, it's just
Um,
too, like back then in 2020, the only people that were on TikTok were in like the 16 to 18 group. So they're voters now. But even younger, it seemed like. It was really weird to me that, that was the group that was most interested in politics was the younger ones. Because like the older you get, the more disillusioned you get with it, I guess. But
just wondering, like how, like, do you organize? Do you use your social media to or bring awareness? I mean, even if it's not like to vote for you, but do you use it to just educate people?
not really. I like to keep a low profile on most of my social medias. I don't have time to be starting fights or, moderating a comment section. I feel like what I do in person has a way bigger effort or impact. What I notice is that if you post something every day, I have, maybe 3,000 followers on Facebook. I'll get about 12 views, 2 or 3 likes. If when I was posting something every day, like every issue that bothered me, I put it out there, and they suppress that quite a bit. Um, Now TikTok is the opposite, right? They boosted a lot of that Palestinian content, um, even when it was maybe not the facts, and that bothers me too, that the influencers that were having the most impact on bringing awareness to the issue were also the people that were spreading quite a bit of misinformation. I do think that TikTok has been involved in, instead of like putting the most views on the organizing that's going to make the biggest difference, they're putting the most views on the organizing that's going to cause the greatest outrage, the organizing that's going to cause the most views and the most comments. um and so there are some things to be careful with there that I just don't feel comfortable interacting in those spaces, on issues that just they're really far away from me. I still believe they're important, and I'm glad that people are doing work on them. But for me, it's like I have enough issues in Eagle Butte to work on, where I think I make a much bigger difference than trying to agitate on every little thing. Um, so I don't know. I don't know if I'm right in this. It's just the philosophy that I've been working off of for the last couple of years. Just that I don't have the energy to fight every issue. I have to pick my battles a little bit more.
Was like for me too, I got burnt out on local issues. Really bad. I got burnt out on local issues. So it's just kind of easier for me right now to step back and just kind of work on at a different, bigger place or whatever. But I get that
Yeah.
too. Like I used to do a lot of
Organizing
organizing.
on the bigger picture, is it people from your community that interact with your social media presence, or like are there probably people all over the world watching right now, right? That's
Yep.
It's to be interesting.
People all over the world. There's people locally here that follow me. The same thing that you were talking about on Facebook, I got off of Meta because of how bad they were messing with the algorithm and the things that they were doing. Like um the same thing, like I could post something and it doesn't make anything, even Doksha hour. Like I could do Doksha hour, but they suppress the views, how it gets around, all of that, and
So
so
that
I
it
would
was on
just,
Facebook Live for a while. Where are we live
yep,
streaming now?
on YouTube.
On YouTube.
YouTube,
And
yeah. So I'm,
their algorithm is a lot less pushy, right?
yeah,
That's Yeah. But
and
it also
it's
means you don't reach new audiences as easily.
so in YouTube, the one thing that I like about YouTube is, like all these lives stay like they did on Facebook, but it can be shared across platforms. Like in Facebook, it's just Facebook.
Mhm.
Like you have to download the app unless you have a laptop and can, but then they require an account and like all this stuff. So I try to make Doksha Hours page on Facebook very open and public, but it just didn't seem and I just couldn't do it anymore. I just like I was only on Facebook because of Doksha Hour. And I'm like, Doksha Hour is just even limiting even that voice, like where like what I try to do with this program is to promote people and the work that they're doing, and native news, native, like that, like Carl Petersen, who is he, where's he come from? No, maybe hardly anybody might know, but then they'll come across maybe the YouTube video and like, hey, gee, there's that guy, um Kyle Mesteth, he does the ground control
That's it.
skateboarding in Pine Ridge.
Yeah.
Like I did a lot of lives with him, interviewed him, talked to him to help him, and now he's really doing a really great job. I had Mo Brings Plenty on. I think he came on about 3 times on Doksha Hour, and Joe Brings Plenty. Just trying to elevate local native voices. And so that's kind of what Doksha Hour does. My TikTok isn't associated with Doksha Hour. My TikTok and the work that I do there, I I had intentions. I really did have intentions about what that was gonna be. But then just as I said, okay, I'm gonna do it and I'm gonna start doing this because I want to eventually just not have to work for anybody, but work for myself. So that's what I was going to do with my TikTok. And then October 7th happened, and then I just sat quiet. I just sat quiet and listened to people and try to promote and support the Palestinian voices that were there trying to tell the story because so many people wouldn't listen or whatever, the propaganda. And so then that's all I did. And then Doksha Hour then would take up some of their messaging, to try to let people know. And sometimes I would even, there was a guy on TikTok named Ali Ramadan, and he did live interviews with the journalists on the ground. And so then I would just do his live to my live and then let people watch themselves the bombing that was occurring. So so that's kind of the things that I do. Um, I do, like I want to do some groundwork. And so what are some of the groundwork things that you've been doing right there in your community?
Well, you were up here 2 weeks ago. We had a conversation, community conversations, and bringing in a lot of different people and groups, to have, a mutual understanding of what everyone's goals are and what people see for the future. I thought that was really interesting. Um, During my campaign, we worked with well, the basically nonpartisan Get Out the Vote and supporting, that instead of running a campaign that's focused on, me, it's focused, um, I wanted to give some effort and some support to just the idea of voting and and the idea of being active in the community. And so there's some people here in the community doing good work on that. Eileen Briggs helped us out with that. Um, she was kind of coordinating. The tribe got involved a little bit. So that was interesting. I haven't been doing a ton of organizing stuff locally recently. For me, like I said, just being there for the kids, teaching and giving them the most opportunities, and not overtly telling them what to think or anything like that. I just don't believe in that in schools, but giving them the opportunities to come up with their own ideas about the world and experiences that they can draw on later as they build their identities and they build what they want for their futures. That's where I'm putting a lot of my effort right now. We had the CB esports team, and so our first esports team, it was cool to be the coach and to give kids that opportunity, again, technology to interact with the wider world, kind of the way I did, to meet kids from other schools and see how they're doing and what they're doing. We went to the state tournament, seventh graders going to the state tournament. I thought that was pretty cool that, they were facing seniors from other schools and um, it was pretty hard when they got to the state tournament. They didn't have a ton of success, but they got there, and that's more than some of our ball teams have done in a long time. Just getting to the state tournament and giving them those experiences. For me, I do think that, I'm at that part of my life where giving my energy locally and investing in people rather than ideas or politics might make a bigger impact in my teaching and the ideas that we bring them, um, that are, again, not political ideas, but just general knowledge about how the world works. Like that plant gets its energy from the sun. And of course, kids hear that when they're younger, but even in high school, just like honing in like the Lakota way of looking at natural resources in the world versus the non-Indian way of looking at natural resources in the world, to have a natural resources class and to have the kids be able to ask those questions and think about them, trying to integrate Lakota in there. It's not quite an immersion class yet, but that was one of my goals is like wildlife and fisheries as an immersion class. Um, Learning about our environment through a Lakota lens. That's where I'm putting a lot of my groundwork effort.
One of the things that I learned on TikTok, from Generation Z and all of this like ground fundraising that happens for Palestinian people is learning how they're doing that. So I think that could be a potential thing for trying to get movement on the reservation to help people with housing or to help people. But then the dangerous thing about that too is um, because there's so many limits you can do with the land, right? Like the Bureau of Indian Affairs or whatever has so many, you have to get a lease, you can only get a 2.5 acre lease, and then you have to get all these signatures for this lease and um all the other things that complicate trying to live on the reservation. But that was something that I've been thinking about on TikTok, like how people come together collectively, even though they don't know each other, they collectively come together and then they make something happen. And so like right now in Palestine, they're digging wells for water, and they already put up 2 wells in North Gaza. And so being able to do something like that, where you're using the greater whole to help a small project on the reservation. And I think that's some of like how Running Strong became so effective, is because they focused on something small, and that was feeding people.
Mhm.
And then it grew to a bigger thing where now they're building buildings and youth projects and doing things like that,
Like you
helping
were
pay
talking with the
energy.
wells, I think that's been in their messaging for a long time is that like having water is life, right? Mini Choni, having that access to water. And that might have been one of their first projects. I don't know, like you said, the feeding, making sure that people had food bags and stuff, but like making sure people get hooked up to water. Um, that's still a big issue, and it's one that for reservations, I think Running Strong is one of the only ones that really focuses on that issue. And I'm sure there's others out there, but to have a nationwide um, fundraising platform for, specifically originally Pine Ridge community, Cheyenne River community, and now Native communities across the country, I think, Billy definitely had the platform to do it, and he did it. And he had some help, but it's interesting, what would that look like in the TikTok age, right? Is that the type of organizing that makes the most sense, or does like really small projects one at a time make the most sense? And is that, like you said, it grows from the first thing that you do?
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
really I see a lot of different things, and like I really like Running Strong, the things that they've done. Um and the other thing is just like how many like what do we think as people? Like I think that has to be addressed. Like as people,
Hmm.
do we think that the government is supposed to solve all our problems?
Hmm.
Or is it like all these nonprofits are supposed to solve all our problems?
And I think that there's issues with both of those ideas, of course, from your irony, I can tell, we talked a little bit last week about self-reliance and having people get to the point where they make their own decisions on how they're going to solve their problems. Um, I think that's one thing that's interesting. Another thing is like utilizing the resources that are available and helping people to find ways to do that. That that's I put some effort into that. It's mostly on a like somebody will call me and they're like, "How do you do this?" or "How do you do that?" And it's like, well, I'm gonna point you in the right direction. I'm not gonna do it for you. I don't have the time to, go represent every person in tribal court. but I can tell you where I can send you a copy of the law. You can read it, you know. I always say, it's not legal advice. You need to find a lawyer if you want legal advice, but it's so hard to find a lawyer.
Because we're in a impoverished communities, like how do you
Yeah.
even pay for that? And
Yeah.
then, it's just a very difficult situation.
Yeah.
Um, so
I don't know
Carl,
if you've
we're
ever
up.
had your name on the lay advocate list, but it's the most interesting calls. I
Yes,
haven't
I have.
represented anybody in court in like a year and a half, but I like to keep my name on the list just in case. And it's always interesting with people that call.
Yeah.
The issues that people have, a lot of times it's like custody stuff, but same thing like with the BIA and like you were talking, how do I get a lease, I've gone through that process and just like helping people. Here's the 15 different offices you need to get signatures from. And here's how you do it. You have to have confidence. You have to walk right into their office and get their signature. You can't just put it on a pile. You'll never get it signed. You have to put yourself out there. If you want something, you have to go get it. And I don't know, if that's contrary to like Lakota beliefs or if, certain people say that it is because they don't want people coming to their office. You know, it's weird, like the individualism versus collectivism arguments and all that. I don't pay them too much mind. I just do what needs to be done for myself and the people that are asking for my help. But but it is interesting sometimes to think about the bigger picture of like what kind of community do we want? What kind of collaborations do we want to have? And that's with nonprofits, it always is weird to me that they're chartered by the state. And I wish that our tribes would regulate nonprofits. But then again, that comes down to, well, it's going to be corrupt and they're going to try and steal the money, this and that. I don't know.
It can, it can be challenging. It could be challenging to get through all of it. And um I don't know, I hope that because we have a lot of problems in our communities with addiction, and so I hope that there's opportunity for Gen Z, opportunity for everyone, but for our youth, because we need, like if we don't have if we don't have youth, we don't have a future, and the importance of understanding that. And so, Carl, I want to thank you for coming on. It was really an interesting conversation. I really enjoy listening to people points of view. It gets me to think about, a lot of times it'll get me even to push myself outside of my comfort zone of thinking and where I exist in the world. You have any closing?
Yeah, no, since we started with the video games, I did want to kind of close with that. If you want to check out the games that I've worked on and some other native games, I do think that that can be a cool way to interface with history and organizing. Um, I have links here, northernplainsgames.com and Indigenous Game Devs. That might be a .org. Yeah, indigenousgamedevs.com. Some cool links to check out on, people that are interfacing with the digital world through video games and telling our stories through this interactive medium. I think that does suit our people, having an interactive medium where our own people are telling their stories. Of course you have books and movies, but it's just another way to tell our stories and to, let our movement give people a way to interact with it. So I think that's interesting. I haven't made a lot of video games in the last couple of years. I've kind of moved away from it, but I still think that it's something interesting to check out.
Invite you back, Carl. We can have more community organizing conversations, or just, some of the things that you're doing. I'm a chicken person now, so we could maybe talk about the agricultural stuff. I'm really interested in that. I've always been a gardener. but I'm more of a egg farmer versus a meat chicken farmer. I have not learned to be savage enough to just hack up a chicken, so I'm not there yet. So
Yeah, we could definitely talk about that. Those are things that I've been doing in the school with my students. We're actually have like 140 eggs in the incubator right now. And we're growing plants in the greenhouse. So that's a lot of fun. Like I said, that's where I like to put my effort is in the small things that could make a big difference here locally.
you
So we'll
probably
see.
didn't you probably didn't realize that your parents were going to turn you into a teacher.
Uh, yeah, that was
Probably
always interesting. When I was in a junior in high school, I asked my dad, "What if I become a teacher?" He says, "I disown you." And so okay, well I'll go do something else. So I went to be video game design. And then 5 years later, or 6 years later, mom texts, "Do you know anybody that wants to be an ag teacher?" I'm like, I'm gonna try it. And even she said she didn't tell the superintendent. Superintendent ended up calling me on her own volition. So I don't know. But yeah, my brother's a teacher too. I don't know if you know that he teaches in the technology side of the high school, so the engineering, robotics, and programming. He's like, huh. Like the day I took the job, he's like, I already took this one, and we should switch. I'm like, I don't think I want to code for a living. And he's like, you can have fun with the programming. I'm gonna play with the chickens.
because chickens are fun. Get them.
Chickens are fun.
Okay. Well, thank you everyone for watching. And again, this is Carl Peterson. He's from Cheyenne River. And hopefully he'll come back on and we'll have chicken conversation. I'll be all excited for that.
Toksa